Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in April. I only read 6 books in April, and part of that is because I went on a girls' trip with some friends for about 4 days, and then I also went to a dance festival for a long weekend with some of my dance students. So I was out of town quite a bit. So quite a bit of this was done via audiobook while I was driving, and so a small month and not a great reading month, but we're still going to talk about it. The first book I read in April was the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. I borrowed the whole trilogy from a coworker, and this one follows Sloane, who is also in the first book in the series, The Friend Zone. I have it here as well, and this was a 5-star read for me last month, so I was really excited for this one, but honestly, this one wasn't it for me. I gave it 3 stars. I highly recommend that you don't read the synopsis of this if you don't want to be spoiled. Literally, the first sentence of this book spoils a lot. And I made the mistake of reading the synopsis of this while I was still reading this, and so it kind of messed it up for me. Ultimately, I just didn't really jive with this one because it has a couple of tropes in it that I don't like in books or romances, so it just really wasn't my type of book, but I definitely see what people like about it. If you like the tropes in this book, then you would definitely vibe with it more than I did. But I don't even want to say too much because I feel like anything I say about this book could be a spoiler. But there is the dog in there. Abby Jimenez seems to have an animal in all of her books, which I enjoy. I like that Abby Jimenez doesn't have that like sarcastic, almost brash banter. I feel like sometimes in romance books, it's like, how can I be sarcastic and brash in my banter and make it like cute? I don't really think it's cute for people to like make jokes at each other's expense in the form of banter. That's why I didn't like The Hating Game and things like that. But this didn't really do that. And Abby Jimenez is great at tackling some harder topics. So I really like Abby Jimenez writing, but this book just really wasn't it for me. So I gave it 3 stars. But then I read Life's Too Short, which is the 3rd book in the series, and this follows different characters. So the first 2, there's a lot of the same characters, and this one, each of those characters are mentioned. I think you could read this one and have not read the others. I think maybe you could say that about all 3 of these, but this one's definitely the most removed. And this follows a lawyer who is a workaholic, and he meets his neighbor who is a influencer, and she has this little baby that she's taking care of, and so he starts kind of helping her. She has a really hard life, and she's trying to do the best with kind of the hand that she was dealt, and she kind of teaches him that there's more to life than just work, and he helps her to realize that you don't always have to be taking care of everybody else. You can let people take care of you for a change. And so I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. Pretty similar to what I've said about the other 2. So after reading this trilogy, or this 3-part series, whatever, this would be my ranking. The Friend Zone, I gave 5 stars, Life's Too Short, 4 stars, and then the Happy Ever After playlist, 3 stars. So I definitely recommend this one. This one is good, and I might skip on this one. Next, I read 9 Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty. I've had this recommended to me so many times, and so I finally had a chance to pick it up. I actually buddy read this with my friend Kelsey from the channel Essentially Booked. I've only ever read Big Little Lies by this author, and I thought it was just average, but I thought this one was average too. I gave it 3 stars, and there is a Hulu series, which I do plan on watching. I haven't yet, but I had heard about it for years, and I keep on picking up that retreat type trope of group of different people coming to a retreat. One by One by Ruth Ware, the writing retreat, this one. I keep on reading that trope because I'm always intrigued by it, but they never do it for me. The juice is not worth the squeeze, in my opinion. But this is about a bunch of different people from different walks of life, and they all come to this wellness retreat. And they know going into it that the people at this retreat are a little bit eccentric, but it did something in books I don't really like, and I felt like there was a lot of buildup, and then the ending just kind of fell flat. But there is a lot of character development in this, and this is written from a bunch of different people's perspectives, and I didn't feel myself getting confused with it. So overall, I feel like if you like this type of story, you might like this book. There's a lot of discussions on getting to know yourself, overcoming grief, all different types of things like that. So it was just average. I love the cover, but I don't know if I'll pick up other Leanne Moriarty's. Next, we have Where I Lost Her by T. Greenwood, and I also gave this one 3 stars. Are you seeing a pattern? T. Greenwood wrote one of my favorite books of last year, which was Keeping Lucy. And then since then, I've read a couple of T. Greenwood books, and none of them have really done anything for me since that. So I did give this one 2 stars. And it's not that it's a bad book. I was just bored out of my mind, and the resolution didn't do anything for me. It didn't redeem the book at all. So this is about a woman who is kind of down on her luck, divorced from her husband, and she's driving down the road. She's been drinking. She's kind of at her wit's end, and she sees a little girl in the road wearing a tutu and boots, and she tries to get the girl to come to her so that she can help her because there's blood on the little girl, and the little girl ends up running away. And so she reports it to the police, and they're looking for this little girl. Well, they look for days and days and days, and they don't find her. So they start accusing her of seeing things, that the girl didn't really exist, that she made it up. And so the whole time I'm thinking there's going to be this shocking discovery or some sort of twist or something as to this little girl and why the woman saw her and where she is and where she came from and what the woman learns from it. And none of that really happened in the end. It's also set in rural New England, and so I was hoping for some really nice small town New England vibes, and I really didn't get any of that. And honestly, the character was pretty pretentious in this, and just overall, not a great book. I don't think you could probably skip it, but it does have deckled edges, it does have a pretty cover, and it has this fun little flap on the inside that I've seen quite a bit recently, but T. Greenwood has a pretty intense backlist. There's a lot of books in her backlist, and so I'll have to really look into them and see if I'm interested in any, but other than Keeping Lucy, I really haven't been impressed. Oh, and I forgot to say that I read this for Flower-a-thon, which was Rachel from Happy Go Lovely Sleeves readathon that she put on in April to celebrate her birthday, and I read this because it had plants on the cover. And here we have another 3-star book, and that is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. And this one I'm really sad about. First of all, that cover, oh my gosh. It's kind of thick, but the premise sounded very similar to The It Girl by Ruth Ware. So you have this woman, Bodhi, and she went to a really prestigious boarding school, and she went there for high school, she went to college, she got married, had a baby, got divorced, and the school has asked her to come back and teach like a summer course on podcasting. That's what she does now. So she's teaching a course on podcasting, and the students in the class decide to make a podcast on a crime that occurred while Bodhi was a student at the school. And so the crime is that Bodhi's roommate actually was murdered, and they found her dead in the pool. And so there was somebody who was convicted of the murder and sentenced to prison, and then now the students are trying to create a podcast, trying to figure out what really happened, because a lot of people don't actually think that that's what happened. And it started out as a 5-star read, and then it dropped to a 4-star, and then the ending was really a 3-star. And I have said this before, I don't like when an author tells me what happened instead of shows me what happened. I don't like that ending monologue where at the last second you have this monologue of what happened and why, that like villainous monologue. And this kind of did that a little bit. It did have fun podcast elements. It had some really good dark academia vibes, but that ending just felt really flat. And I actually had to go back and re-listen to it because it ended and I was washing dishes, I think, and listening to the audiobook. And I was like, wait a second, it's over. And I had to go back and re-listen to it. And I still don't really know what the conclusion was. I don't really understand what happened in the ending. So kind of a bummer, but I definitely think that if you like dark academia, or you like podcasts and books, or you liked The It Girl by Ruth Ware, or if you liked like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, those types of books, I think that you would like this. Just be prepared that the ending is kind of unsatisfying. And then the last book I read in April, I actually just finished this morning. It is April 30th when I'm filming it, and I finished this about 2 hours ago, and it is The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. And this was the book of the month that I got last month, I think, and it's a historical fiction book, and it's based on a true story. So it's based in Richmond in 1811 when a theater catches fire, and it's based on a real Richmond theater that did catch fire in the early 1800s. And it's written from a couple of different perspectives, but I really recommend the audiobook. I got it on Scribd. I have my Scribd referral link linked below if you're interested in trying it out. But there is different voice actors for each of the points of view, which I really liked, and it really felt like you were attaching to the characters, and it almost felt like I was watching it play out in real time. And it was so interesting because it's a couple of different types of people from different walks of life, and it's their perspective on what was happening when the Richmond Theater caught fire and then what happened following it. And this made me feel sick to my stomach sometimes, talking about the burns and the medical things that were being done or not being done. Like at one point, the doctors tell the nurses to have the burn victims drink turpentine, and just all kinds of just crazy things that, I'm so glad we've evolved from that. There's also a lot of discussion about slavery, and at one point, a group of men decide to blame the theater fire on a slave revolt, and how easy that was to do. And it just, some of it made me just very sick to my stomach. So there's a lot of trigger warnings, a lot of graphic burn talk, a lot of graphic sexual assault discussion, slavery. So definitely check trigger warnings, but this was super impactful. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it discussed a lot in just a short amount of time and did it well. And the reason I'm giving this 4 stars instead of 5 is what I typically feel about historical fiction books, and that is that it went on a little bit too long. Because by the time we realized what happened with the theater fire, it was like, okay, let's move it along here. But it was pretty quick paced, and it didn't feel like I was reading about the 1800s. There wasn't a whole lot of focus on, things outside of the theater. And so many things in the theater world are still really similar today. So that was interesting. I loved the theater discussion, and I loved that we are getting more historical fiction books that have nothing to do with war. So that really makes me happy, because I'm starting to get a little tired of those, especially the World War II ones. And so I'm just really excited to read more historical fiction books that aren't about war, because I feel like sometimes we get bogged down with some of those. So definitely recommend this one. Again, beautiful cover. And there's like brush strokes, like this is obviously a painting, and a lot of really cool mentions of different places and things in Virginia. And I live in Virginia, so that was really interesting to me as well. And the author also lives in Virginia. So if you are a native Virginian, I definitely recommend picking this up, even if you don't think you're into historical fiction. If you like the theater or opera or dance or anything like that, try it out. Okay, that was all of the books that I read in April. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment down below and let me know what your favorite book was that you read in April. And comment a flower down below if you made it this far. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.